All right. Welcome. It is Sunday night, and I got a little time today. Been catching up on a few things, and I made kind of a promise to a friend of mine who's been around my channel for like 4 years, and his name's Howlando, and he's been asking me about this particular subject for about 4 years too. But he had posted on my YouTube channel in the comment section some questions, and I thought the best way to address them was just to visually show what my argument is about, because a lot of people don't seem to understand my argument, and I think that's largely because many of us are visual learners. I know that I am, and I wanted a visual representation because I think that a lot of people didn't understand my particular argument. I did post it on Twitter. I forgot one negation, so I did have a little addendum or erratum to fix that, but I can't go back and edit that because it's only editable for an hour. But anyways, welcome John Foley. Nice to see you out there. KK, hello. Sean G, what up, party people? Hopefully this will be fun. Hopefully people will get something out of this, because again, it's very hard to explain this kind of stuff without being able to visually see what my argument actually does. And so I would hope that if you guys will stick around, give me some feedback on this, especially you, John. And let me know if the visual representation helped in any way, shape, or form. That's really the goal. And if it does help you guys, then hopefully it'll help Howlando, because I want Howlando to understand this. I really do. That's why I'm doing this. And so I had posted again on Twitter, and I went through the detail about why this all works, right? But I'm just not going to even get into that. I'm going to explain it to you guys by the visual representation, by the first question he asks. So the first question he asked, and I'm going to bring up my first visual here. He says, the ACA, which is the Atheist Community of Austin, lack theist usage of terms theist and atheist are just a dichotomy. You're either a theist or not a theist, to which they ascribe the term atheist. He's absolutely correct on that. Here's the problem. When you do that, and I'm not going to get into the logic of that because I've done it many, many times, so I don't really need to show that, I don't think, but you can ask me later maybe. But the reality is, if you make theist and atheist a dichotomy, then everything in the universe becomes dichotomous. This is unavoidable for the fact that if you have a universal set and you have a true dichotomy of a value and its negation, such as A or not A, that's always true. So if I instantiate A with something like theist, I end up with theist or not theist, always true. Now, if I just change that not theist to the word atheist, I end up with theist or atheist, always true. Rocks are not theist. Rocks are non-theist. They do not believe in God. So they are in the category of things that do not have a God belief. So you have theist, which are the people that believe in some type of God, and everybody else who doesn't. You have atheists who believe there's no God, and everybody else who doesn't, which would be non-atheism. But we'll get into that. But if you just take the term non-theist, which includes everything that's not a theist, and you just semantically change it to the word atheist, now you have everything that set has not changed, now becomes an atheist, including rocks. That's the simplest way I can explain it. I mean, sure, I can show you the set theory. It's not that complicated. It's basically a complementary set. It's such that for anything that's in the element of a universe that's in set A cannot be in set not A, and vice versa. And so if you're in the set of theist, you're not in the set of not theist. If you're in the set of not theist, you're not in the set of theist. So rocks are in the set of not theist. And if you just change the name to atheist, now rocks are atheist. Now, this is pretty well standard. I don't think Howlando will balk at that. So that's why I'm not really getting too much into that, because Aaron Ra agrees with that, even though, it's stupid, but it just by necessity, by local necessity, it makes everything that's not theist, like rocks, an atheist. We call that rock atheism. And that's why Aaron says that rocks are atheism, for that very reason. So let me show you what they're actually doing here. And I'm going to use my little chart here to show you visually. So the way this is set up, this is called a grimace square, or a semiotic square of opposition. It's based on the Aristotelian square of opposition. This is what my paper is about. So if you don't understand what you're looking at here, please, dear God, do not tell me that my paper is wrong. Do not tell me that you have found errors in my paper if you're not understanding what you're looking at right now, because my paper is absolutely about this 100%. So for everybody out there that says my paper is wrong, if you look at my visual and you don't understand it, you're not in a position to tell me about my paper. Straight up. Okay. So what way this works is that you have a maximum, you have a minimum, and you have an average, is what I put it as. I could put warm here, cold here, average temperature here, because warm and cold are called contraries. Yep. Thank you, Hank. Yep. My paper is right. So the way this square is set up, it has a relationships between these types of positions. You have what's called the negative dissex and the positive dissex, which is basically everything on this side has to do with the negational term. This one has to do with the positive term. So if I don't even use the terms like theist or atheist or anything like that, and I just set this up as a maximum, which would be hot, and again, as hot as you want, right? It's just hot. We're going to call that the maximum, hot. We're going to call the minimum cold because those are contraries. Something cannot be both hot and cold at the same time, right? So contraries are set up by this relationship here, S1 NAND S2, which basically means that you can be hot, you can be cold, you can be neither, but you cannot be both. That's the NAND operation, the Boolean NAND operation. So the average temperature between hot and cold is called warm. So this neuter term down here would be warm. So the complex S term is the relationship of the contraries between the S1 position on the corner here and the S2 position. So if you have hot over here, you have not hot down here because it's a little negation symbol, right? Hot, not cold. You have cold over here, which implies not hot. Not hot is the negation of hot. So this little symbol here is negation. So you have hot. These opposite, which I didn't include in here, are called contradictories. Okay, so the contradictories are S1, not S1, S2, and not S2, which I have here. And then the other relationships are implications, which are S1 implies negative or not S2, which is basically saying if it's hot, it is not cold because it cannot be cold because it's a contrary. And then down here, you have what's called a subcontrary, which is it can be both of these. So it can be not hot, it can be not cold, sorry, and it can be not hot. And if it's not cold or not hot, we're going to call that warm, which is the average. So you have three positions: hot, warm, and cold, which pretty much covers all the bases. You could have it super hot, super cold, and then you have an average, or we'll call that warm. Again, not really being specific to the temperature relationships, but to the relationships of you have three positions, two contraries, and then a neuter position. So if you do that with atheism and theism, and you just put up here, you put theism, which is going to be the belief that there's no God, or sorry, belief there's a God, theism. Then the contrary position is going to be the belief that there is no God. The contradictory position is going to be not theism, right? And so what the ACA has done, oh, you can't see my cursor? Oh, interesting. Okay. I am on StreamYard, so I don't know how to capture that then. There we go. How about that? Does that work better? Thank you for pointing that out. There we go. There we go. That works better. All right. So if you have atheism up here in the S1 position, then not atheism is down here. There's a contradictories, right? You cannot be an atheist and not atheist at the same time. If you have atheism up here, then you have not atheism down here. You cannot be an atheist and not an atheist at the same time. So the diagonals are contradictories. Now, you got to remember, we're talking about beliefs here. We're not talking about the ontological status of God. God exists or God does not exist. But these are beliefs. You can believe God exists, which would be S1, theist. You can believe God does not exist, which is S2. And you can have no position either way, which we call agnostic in philosophy. That's how it's set up in philosophy. And this is why it's set up in philosophy. Because if you have the belief that God exists here, what are you going to put here? The negation of the proposition of theism is the belief there is no God. You don't have to call this atheism according to the ACA, but what else are they going to call it? In fact, Draper points out the ACA's definition of a psychological state doesn't even allow you for strong atheism, is what they would call it. You cannot get a proposition out of a psychological state. It leaves it out in the rain, Draper says. And he's right. You cannot derive a proposition that could be true or false from a psychological state. So their usages are just so anti-philosophical, it's ridiculous. But think about this. If this position here is theism, that somebody has the belief that there's a God, what else are you going to call S2 position? Like, seriously, what else do you want to call it? It literally is the negation of the proposition. And so if this is going to be the opposite of this, the min-max, right? Maximum is that you believe there's God. The minimum is you believe there's no God. Those are going to be the extrema. If you believe there's a God, it implies you don't believe there isn't a God. If you believe there isn't a God, it implies, which is this arrow, which is called a subalternation, implies you don't believe there's a God. But if you don't have the belief there's a God and you don't have to believe there isn't a God, then you neither believe theism and you neither believe atheism. We call that agnostic. That's the third position, or the middle ground. This neuter position, because these are subcontraries. So the neuter position is not theism, not atheism, but the neuter position. But let's look what happens when you take the ACA and you say, oh, theism and atheism are dichotomy. Okay, well, that means they're contradictories. That means the S1 position is theism, and down here they put down atheism. This is non-theism, right? Theism, not theism. Oops, sorry, over here. Theism, not theism, right? If this is not theism and this is theism, and they're going to call this atheism, then you've just got rid of this neuter position. And let me show you how. This whole side of the negative dissix is, according to Google's definition of atheism, all atheism. It is a person who believes there's no God, disbelieves there's a God, or lacks a belief, which would be not theism. So if you believe there's no God, that implies you do not believe there is a God. This is why that's called a subalternation. So this entire negative dissix is atheism according to the definition on Google, which atheists always said, hey, Steve, you're using the wrong definition. No, the frick I'm not. I am using the definition I want to use, which is the Google definition, to show the problem with it. My paper is basically a reductio ad absurdum for the most part. If you use the definition that atheism is the disbelief there's a God, which is this, or lack of belief, which is this, then all this becomes atheism. Because if you believe there's no God, you're an atheist. If you lack a belief there's a God, you're an atheist, according to the ACA. Even though the ACA doesn't have this position, they've eliminated this position. The ACA has said, oh, theism is dichotomous to atheism. And they put atheism down here in the square, and they make those contradictories. But that leaves literally atheism as a strong belief out in the rain, because you cannot get to this position. You cannot get to strong atheism because, one, this is a psychological position, and two, everything is a theist or an atheist. Everything, rocks, quarks, whatever, it doesn't matter. The sun is a atheist according to the ACA. Yep. Hey, thank you, Shill, for becoming a new member or renewing. Thank you, Shill. Bill says, but you're not agnostic if you believe a supernatural force or intelligence in the universe, are you? Well, if you call that a God, then no. I mean, I'm using the term God to be some kind of supernatural being, right? You know. Oh, I'm Shill gifted 5 memberships. Who's the lucky people? Was going to be Bill, Hank, John, who's already a member, and we'll see. I think you got to chat in order to be gifted, if I'm not mistaken. Edward Curran puts theism as a new position. Checkmate. I don't know what that means, Hank. All right, so let's continue here. So if this is all atheism here, right, then what happens when you have just non-theism? Well, if you have this position down here of non-theism, which is the contradictory of theism, and you don't have this position, you don't have this position. If you don't believe there's no God, you have this position here. The only other position you can have is this one, because this is a contradictory. You cannot have S1 and not S1. So if you're in the S negative or not S1 position where you're a non-theist, right? If you're a non-theist and you don't hold to the belief that there's a God up here, the only other option you have is this one. Again, because of subcontrary connections, which is an OR, by the way. It's an OR Boolean operator. this is basically saying if you lack a belief in God, you can either A, lack a belief in God because you believe there's no God, which implies by a subalternation that you lack a belief, or you can hold no belief either way and you can become an agnostic. So what they do is when they say that atheism is a disbelief or a lack of belief, and they assume this entire negative distix, and they say, oh, it's just a lack of belief. There's a lack of belief is atheism, according to a dichotomy that Howlando pointed out. That means they subsume this entire position, the average. Now think about this. If this was warm and this is cold, they've now said that warm is now cold. You could visually see it. If this is the average, which would be warm, American atheists are saying, oh no, warm, it means cold. If you're a warmest, you're a coldest. That's exactly what they're doing when they're saying, oh, you lack a belief in God, you're an atheist, because they're taking this neuter position, this subcontrary relationship, and they're subsuming it into here. That's semantic collapse, because now you have a term, atheist, that not only includes the negative distix here, but also includes the neuter term, which is dishonest. The theist can then come along and say, oh, well, wait a minute here. A theist is somebody who believes there's no God, or a theist believes somebody there's a God, but also we're going to call that theist if you lack a belief there isn't a God, just like the atheist did, which was something that Flew wanted in 1972 when he wrote The Presumption of Atheism. So the theist, if the theist starts, again, they're not doing this right now, but let's say they did in the future. Let's say theism 2,000 years from now was thought of, either you believe there's a God or you merely lack a belief that there isn't one. Words change. Atheists tell me all the time, words change. Okay, well, if theists start using the term like that because words change, then all of a sudden you have a complete semantic collapse of terms, because now you have, if you're in this neuter position here, right? If you don't believe there's a God and you don't believe there isn't a God, you're down here in the average. But the atheist has already assumed this and called that atheism, and the theist has already assumed this and called this theism. So now you have a person who's an atheist, an agnostic, and a theist all at the same time. That is atheist semantic collapse, because now you have a person that has three positions that all mean the same thing, because atheism in the weak case, theism in the weak case, and agnosticism all mean the same thing logically. There you go. John says, you're assuming two mutually exclusive positions at the same time. Well, I'm not. They are, but yeah, they're assuming, because this, I keep explaining, agnostic and atheism are mutually exclusive in philosophy for good reason. And I've never had anybody explain otherwise why that shouldn't be the case. All they do is say, oh, look at a dictionary. Well, if your educational level is only that you're going to cite me a dictionary, don't bother talk to me. You're just not going to do. You're just not going to get anywhere. I mean, I've done this for 10 years. You're wasting my time. Show me using the square of opposition where my argument fails, because I've set the relationships. I set them in my paper. I've defined them. I use a standard square of opposition. Only I use it for semiotics, which is not unusual. You can definitely do that. And I literally explain that if you make this entire negative distix atheism, then this gets assumed in here if you lack a belief. If you merely just lack a belief, you're just a non-theist, because if you're not this position, you have to be this position. There are no other positions you can possibly be. There are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positions you can take here. You can believe God exists. You can believe God does not exist. You cannot believe God exists. You cannot believe God does not exist. And you can take agnostic, which is the conjunction of those two. So, I mean, it's not really 5 positions, but you see what I'm saying? There's 1, 2, 3, 4 corners here. And then the combined conjunction of the not S2 and not S1 is agnosticism. Neither believes God exists nor believes God does not exist. And I think I have one more here. One sec. Nope, that's it. Okay, so let me get to the next question here. How do Wiccans fit in the model? I don't know. If they believe in God, then whatever. Yeah, I don't think, they believe in Mother Earth. I mean, again, if they want to call that a God, then they're a theist. If they don't, then they're an atheist. I don't care. Pick a lane. They just can't be both a theist and an atheist at the same time, unless you have semantic collapse like this by using terms like, oh, I'm just going to call not theist bunch of atheist. Okay, well, look what you've done by doing that. One, you've categorized everything that was in the non-theist set, which was rocks, and you just relabeled it atheist. Now rocks are atheist. Stupid. And also, you've eliminated this position. You've eliminated the agnostic position. Well, you're an agnostic. You lack a belief in God. Therefore, you're an atheist. Okay, so if this is now subsumed into this, that's semantic collapse, because now you've lost the ability to have neither of these positions. You've lost the neither position. You're just saying, oh no, you can't take this position. If you take this position, you're still this position. But again, hot, cold, warm, tall, short, average. Any two contradictions, or any two contraries with a neuter position will do this. So if you have tall, no matter how tall you are, short, no matter how short you are, then average, and the atheist community of Austin comes around and says, oh, we're going to call that average. We're going to put that under atheism. Oh, wait, warm? No, we're going to call that cold. Well, why? You've now just eliminated the warm position. That's the dishonest tactic that the atheist community of Austin does. Fairly classy bartender says, thanks, Steve. I love speaking with you on Twitter. Does rejecting P but suspending belief in P violate a law of non-contradiction? You cannot reject and suspend belief on the okay, so here's the thing. If you suspend belief in not P, you suspend belief in P because it's called closed under negation. Now think about why, though. If I suspend belief on a proposition where I say, okay, the proposition here of not P would be God does not exist, and I suspend belief on that, means I'm not having a judgment on it, which means I'm not assigning a truth value, which means I'm neither a theist nor atheist. So if I suspend judgment on not P, I have to suspend judgment on P. Because if I didn't suspend judgment on P, I made a judgment call on it, and I said, oh, I accept P. Okay, then I'm a theist. Oh, no, I reject P. Then I'm an atheist. Because rejection, you have to remember in logic, means to assert negation. So if you reject P, means you believe P is false, you can then not suspend belief in P because you've already made a judgment call. You've already said it's false. Suspending a belief in not P means that you have taken the position where you're not taking any position directly on the proposition. You're down here in the neuter term. You're saying not atheism, not theism. And again, if somebody wants to tell me how to label these things, I did this experiment on Twitter. I've done this experiment on Reddit and said, okay, what do you want to label these positions? I did it on YouTube. What do you want to label these positions? Not a single solitary atheist was able to label these positions other than what philosophy has them as, and be coherent. You can't do it, because if I call this theist, this has to be not theist down here. And if this is not theist, then what the hell you call this? This is the belief there isn't a God. You have to call this position something. Well, the ACA calls this atheist, which means they have to call this position atheist. But which actually you can't really do, because again, if you're calling non-theism atheism, you have a psychological state. And if you have a psychological state, you cannot get this propositional state up here. If you're down here and you're a non-theist, that's a psychological state. You cannot then derive this state from here. It's not possible to get a propositional state. So according to the ACA, strong atheism doesn't really exist because of philosophy. It's nuanced. I get it. And they don't understand it. But Dr. Paul Draper makes it very clear in SEP, by doing what they're doing, you've eliminated strong atheism as atheism. You cannot get to that position. It's just anybody who lacks a belief. And yes, atheists who believe there's no God do lack a belief. But the problem is you cannot derive that from there, because you cannot derive a proposition from a psychological state. Okay, so Howlando goes on to ask, your paper and your arguments address contrary positions with agnostic positions in between. Yes, these two positions here are contraries. So any two contraries, you can get a neuter position. So tall, short, middle, hot, cold, warm. Think of something. Think of two contraries, and you'll get a middle term out of it. So here you just have theist, atheism, and then the middle term would be agnostic, right? Neither believes God exists nor believes God does not exist. Bill says no middle ground, maybe a false dichotomy. What are if there are more options, not trying to dispute what you're saying, but merely trying to be interesting? I don't understand the question. The middle ground is only in relationship to the logic, right? Believe God exists, which is here. Believe God does not exist, which is here. The middle ground is believes neither. See the not symbol? So believe God exists, believe God does not exist. Neither believes God does not exist, which because these are contradictories. You can't be both this corner and that corner. And these are contradictories. You can't be this corner and that corner. And so the agnostic is this position down here, which is called a subcontrary, which is a logical Boolean operative or. But this means that you can be this or you can be that. You can be both, but you cannot be neither. That's why it's an or. Because you have to be at least one of these. And think about that. If I'm a theist and I'm over here, then I can't be this position. I must be this position, right? If I believe there's a God, it means I do not believe there isn't a God. So if I'm in this position, that's why there's a subalternation here. If I'm in this position, I have to be this position. If I'm this position, I have to be this position. This is a subset of this. So if I'm a theist, then I can't be both of these. If I'm an atheist, I can't be both of these. But I can't be neither. I can be neither. And if I'm neither, then I'm this position. So the subcontrary position is you could be this, you can be that, you can be both, but you cannot be neither of these two, because no whatever other position you take, you're either going to be not S2 or not S1. Okay, so he goes on to ask, you cannot map dichotomy onto contrary framework is a type of category error. I don't understand what he means by that. I literally can map any contraries on here because the complex S term is a contrary term. And contraries are defined as S1 by the Boolean operative NAND S2, which means you can be one, you can be the other. You can't be both, but you can be neither. That's the NAND operator. So any two contraries, atheism and theism, are epistemic contraries. They're ontological contradictories, which is a little bit confusing. People point out that atheism and theism are ontological contraries, meaning that if God exists, theism is true. If God does not exist, atheism is true. One of them must be correct because God either exists or does not exist. That is a dichotomy, strict dichotomy. So it is a fact that either the theists have got it right or the atheists have got it right. This is why atheism has to be propositional to be true. It makes no sense to have atheism as merely a lack of belief, because then it cannot be true or false. So if God doesn't exist, you can't say atheists are right. And that's silly. I don't know why the atheist community of Austin would say something so damn stupid. Because if you are saying that atheism is merely a lack of belief and God doesn't exist, then you cannot say atheism is true because it's not propositional. It's stupid to do that. It's just absolutely stupid. Why would atheists want to do that? You know? But like I said, think of two contraries, because he said you cannot map contraries. Well, I clearly can. Here's the square of opposition doing it, the semiotic square of opposition. And like I said, I've set up all the relationships here. I set it up in metalogic in my paper. But essentially, this is what it boils down to. I mean, I simplified it. He then goes on to say, there's no semantic collapse because you're attempting to map dichotomy onto contrary framework, which can't be done, thereby smuggling in and one sec, I gotta scroll here. Let me read this again. He said there's no semantic collapse because you're attempting to map dichotomy onto a contrary framework, which can't be done, thereby smuggling in and substituting your semantic of the word atheist that is incompatible with their semantics of the word atheist and not what that means. That's completely wrong. I am using their definition here, Howlando. I'm using the atheist definition that if atheism is merely a lack of belief, it still has to be down here. It has no other option. Theist or not theist. That's logic. This is why I keep saying it's not about definitions, it's about logic. People keep on arguing for 10 fucking years. Oh, Steve's worried about definitions. No, I'm talking about logic. Logically, if you're here, you're a theist. If you're here, you're not a theist. Those are called contradictories. So if I label this theist, I have to label this not theist, because that's logic. A or not A is always true. The ACA can come in and say, oh, I'm just going to relabel this and I'm going to call this atheist. Okay. Then that leads to this, the semantic collapse. They're using the argument that the definition for atheism on Google is prescriptive. It's not. It's descriptive. It's describing somebody. All atheists that believe there's a God lack a belief. It's not saying if you lack a belief in God, you're instantly an atheist. That's not what it's saying at all. That's prescriptivism. But according to the ACA, if you lack a belief, you're an atheist, which means that if you're down here as a non-theist and they call that an atheist, you're an atheist, which means this is irrelevant, whether you believe there's no God or not. And it's actually not even possible to derive that. And if you're not somebody who believes there's no God, the only other position is this one, which means you have no position either way. You're a fence sitter. Here's a fun fact for all the lack of belief atheists out there. You're fence sitting. You're taking this position of non-theism. You're calling this atheist. You're not accepting there's no God. You accept, which means you're not an atheist, or not a strong atheist, you would call it, but you're not this position here. You're not somebody who believes there's no God. You don't have to call it atheism. You can just say believes there's no God, believe there is a God, right? You can say, you don't have to use a label. You can say believes there is a God, believes there's no God, because those are your maximum and minimums. So if you believe there's no God, here is, you don't believe there's no God. And by the way, this is why Aaron Ra lost his shit, because he thought this was a double negative by saying it is not the case, there is no God. No, that's not a double negative. If I say I do not believe that God does not exist, that's not a double negative. You cannot take the negator, which is a unitary operator, off the predicate and somehow migrate it to the proposition. It doesn't work that way. This is the position of you're not accepting that there isn't a God, logically. So if you don't accept there isn't a God and you don't accept there is a God, that's agnostic, the neuter position, but they call that atheist. Again, semantic collapse, because then they're just calling all of this atheist. They're taking this dissix, they're taking the average, and they're all calling that atheist. That's dishonest, because they're taking 2/3 of the pie. There's the 1/3, which is the theist. There's the 1/3, which is the atheist, and there's 1/3 that's the people that have positions no other way. Savaniali for 20. Thank you for the super chat, Savaniel. He says, if you ask someone if you have a position and you don't have a position because you've never considered it before, if you say no, does that make you agnostic, or are you simply answering that you don't have a position? Let me think about that. It's very vague when you say no. If I say if you have a position and you say no, then I can't even really say if you're agnostic or whatever. I mean, I can't even really say what that would mean, right? Because if you never considered it before, you're innocent, right? A baby has never considered the proposition as a God. They're innocent toward the proposition. And it's so funny because I brought that to somebody's attention on Twitter the other day, and they're like, oh, that's just apologetics. That's just theism, calling it innocent. I'm like, no, that's Graham Oppie, one of the world's leading atheist philosophers of our generation. He calls it innocent, and I absolutely agree with him. If you are unaware of a proposition, why would you be able to evaluate it? You're innocent toward that proposition, right? John says, let me in, see if I'm raging here, 2 pounds. Yes, John, I will let you in. But give me a second here, okay? Steve said, go to the base set. Bill says, one of them must be correct. I'm sorry to interject, but could there possibly be a third or fourth option? No, because there's only 3 possibilities. You believe there's a God. You believe there isn't a God. Okay, so this is believes there's a God, believe there isn't a God, or you have no position either way. There's only 3 epistemic positions that are rational. There is one other position that is irrational, but it's disallowed because of the subcontraries, because it's disallowed because it's an epistemic contradiction. So let me see if the audience is paying attention here. What's the 4th position that is possible, but is an epistemic contradiction? So one of them is believes P, believes a proposition. Another one is believes not P. Another one is believes neither P nor not P. So what would you say would be the 4th one? Because there's only 4, and 3 of them are rational. One of them is irrational. Bill says, well, excellent response. The suspension of disbelief. Exactly. The suspension of disbelief, like I said, is closed under negation. If you suspend disbelief on one, you suspend disbelief on the negation. And disbelief does mean to believe false. I don't care what anybody says. They're idiots. When they start saying, oh, disbelief means that you can't accept something to be true, why would that make any sense for a proposition? Am I saying I disbelieve P? Am I saying, oh, I have a mental block and I can't accept reality? If I say I stared in disbelief, it means that I'm having a cognitive problem apprehending something. That's a different sense of the word disbelief. That's not how the word disbelief is used in propositional logic. The word disbelief and used as propositional logic is that you believe something to be false. Believe both. Exactly. Thank you, Hank. Hank gets it. I know Hank understands my argument. So the fourth option, and I'll get John in here, is that you believe the proposition is true and you believe the proposition is false, which is clearly an epistemic contradiction. And so it doesn't fit in here because it's not possible. It would basically be you believing S1 that God exists and S2, not S1 that God does not exist. It's a contradiction. You can't do that because these diagonals here, which I don't show here, usually there's a diagonal line that goes in here, but I didn't include them. That shows that the corners are contradictions. All right, so let me see how to get John in here. Well, I know how to get John. I'm StreamYards. Duh. All right, there you go. Come on in, and I'll pin it. Can't have John crying in the live chat. I'll pin it if whoever wants to come in. Bill says, but I have one question. Have you ever experienced that could be described as a miracle? Not really. No. I mean, sure, there might be some preternatural stuff, but no, I can't say I've ever experienced a miracle like that. All right, let's see what else Howlando has said. He says, each of your arguments and papers at some point, well, I've only had one paper, but at some point uses the word atheist that is applicable only the way you mean it. No. My paper uses the way the atheists use it by the atheist community of Austin, that if you lack a belief, you're an atheist. That's why it leads to semantic collapse. I cannot emphasize that enough. I start off with atheism as the belief there's no God, because what else are you ever going to call that position? What do you want to call somebody who believes there's no God if not an atheist? I'm not defining it prescriptively such that, you have to label yourself an atheist. You can call yourself anything you want. I'm just saying that in my paper, you have to call that position something. You have to call the S2 position something. What do you want to call it? This is your minimum here. What do you want to call somebody who believes there's no God, if not an atheist? Help me out, because I've walked through this with people and they've not been able to resolve this. Then he says, and it's not applicable in the way they mean it. Well, yes, it is. They literally don't have a word for what you call atheist position in their parlance. That is true, because for the very reason, because you cannot derive atheism out of a psychological state. So you're right. They don't have a word for it, although they will call it atheist, right? If I say, hey, look, I believe there's no God, they're going to be like, yeah, you're an atheist. Why? Because you lack a belief. Because lack of belief is a necessary condition for atheism, but not a sufficient. So they're still going to call that atheist, but they really don't have a word for it, like a special word. They're just going to throw that in there, which leads to semantic collapse. There's nothing wrong with your paper and arguments per se, other than they do not apply to the lack position, and the error is just you try to make that connection. No, my paper is proving the lack theist position leads to semantic collapse. I don't know how much I can. I really don't. Let me get John here. I don't know how else I can explain that. Hi, John.
Evening.
Are you losing your mind?
Sorry?
Are you losing your mind?
Yes, I am. Because
you can't semiotics, don't do that.
Semiotics is fairly straightforward. But it's also from the perspective of set theory. Like with atheism, theism, like the new atheist, the ACA position, essentially means that the weak and the strong of both ends of the scale mean the same thing.
Yes. Well, no. Well, yeah. If sort of, because if you see here, I have hot, cold, and warm. So if I have the S1 position is hot, the S2 position is cold, then we're going to call neither hot nor cold warm, right? It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now the ACA is coming along and saying, "Oh, we're going to take this position. Oh, you're not hot. Oh, then we're going to call you an atheist. You're warm. Oh, well, you're not. Or I guess cold. You're not cold. Well, we're still going to call you cold because cold is anything that's not hot. That's exactly what they're doing. They're taking, instead of having hot and cold, which is going to be theist or not, atheist, they're calling cold not hot. So if this is hot, S2 is not hot, then you've eliminated the warm position.
Yeah, it's having cake and eating it too. It's ridiculous.
I don't even know how else to describe it, man. I mean, I think it's pretty freaking clear is what it's taking this warm position and saying, oh, you're warm, we're going to call that cold. Oh, you're an agnostic, we're going to call that atheist. You cannot deny the visual subsuming of it here, right? Because this is your square. This is atheism according to the ACA and the Google, which is, by the way, is BS. To be an atheist in philosophy, it's only S2. S1 is not atheism in philosophy. Sorry, guys, it's not. And then if they assume atheism as the S negative, not S1 position, then you have to take this whole bottom area because it's subcontraries and say, oh, you have no position either way. Nope, you lack a belief here. You're an atheist.
Yeah,
am I missing something, John? Am I explaining it correctly?
This is exactly correct, and I genuinely don't understand. Like, if you, I have a degree of sympathy for people that have been sort of battered by the new atheist TM movement in terms of, because there is an intuition that's going on here. And the argument from innocence or the argument from ignorance, if you're being unkind, it does jive with people's intuitions. And like what people tend to say is like, well, if I've not heard the argument before, if I've not heard the claim before, then why would I have a position on the claim? And therefore the argument from what we said is innocence or ignorance comes into play. But that actually perfectly defines the neither believing nor unbelieving position.
Correct.
But for some reason, they want to put it into a perfect dichotomy from the perspective of belief.
But they cannot do that logically.
Which they can't. Ontologically speaking, either something does or doesn't exist. But your belief on the proposition has three positions. Yes. It's not dichotomous. Yes.
Yes. Believe, don't believe. Or excuse me, believe P, believe not P, or believe neither. Those are your three positions.
Yes, and if you believe neither, that can be for many reasons. It can be because you've never heard the proposition before. It's because you're not capable of assessing the proposition. It can be because you've heard the proposition and you're not convinced in either direction.
That is true, but let me clarify this because this is a little bit confusing. This is why you can't use. I used a Venn. I did use a Venn diagram to explain this one time, but the reality is,
you do need the semiotic square to explain. You can't use Venn diagram.
You need semiotics, or you need what's called an Euler diagram. An Euler diagram will allow for a little bit more nuance, because the problem with this is that this position down here is somebody who's evaluated the proposition but suspended just belief. This is not innocent down here. None of this applies to innocence.
No. But what I mean is the three positions are the same, but the reasons for coming to the conclusions are different.
Correct.
An Euler diagram would help with that.
Yes, an Euler diagram would be better for that, because an Euler diagram would be able to. And I did this in logic one time too, to show that just because you meet the criteria for not S2 and not S1, where you neither believe or disbelieve, doesn't make you an agnostic. It makes you either an agnostic or innocent. But an innocent hasn't evaluated the proposition, so it cannot suspend judgment on something that it has not evaluated. So this only assumes that somebody is aware of the proposition. I will grant that. And I did put that in my paper, and I also put in things like the subject proposes sincerity. You know?
I don't think that's a big issue, because I just actually assume if you're not aware of the proposition, you don't have a position on it.
Well, I think, Hank,
right, but you're not
the reason the final position, the final square that you end up on, is expressed in this diagram. But the reason, the rationale, the whys and the wherefores for how you end up on the squares is different. But the conclusion you get to is expressed in this diagram.
Yeah, you can logically denote an innocent is not S2 and not S1, but the problem is that they didn't derive that by evaluation. This is only applicable to those that are aware of the proposition as try to evaluate it. I have to make that exceptionally clear, because an innocent is not an agnostic. I had a very dishonest person one time claim that I was claiming rocks were atheist rocks were agnostic because they neither believe God exists nor believe God does not exist. And that's not what I said at all. I was basically doing an internal critique for somebody else. I've never, ever believed that rocks were agnostic. That's just stupid.
Right. Do you remember we had that discussion with what was his name, Big Brain Mark something or other? And this is where what was his name, Mark something? And we drilled down where we ended up like having a back and forth about like our baby's atheist.
Right.
Which is exactly. Because it's a fucking insane question to ask.
Because look at right here. Again, hell, if you guys want to walk through it, you can. What do you want to call? Wait, where you at, John? You got a lot of background noise.
No, sorry. Yeah. No, I'm literally sat in my bedroom right now.
Oh, I don't know. I hear myself talking. Testing. Oh, now it's clown. Oh, you're muted. That's why. Okay, so
yeah. Sorry, I'll just put my mic on when I'm talking. Sorry.
That's fine. All right, so let's walk through this, and then I guess I want to keep this under an hour, and I'm not trying to rush, but I got 15 minutes. I want to keep this under an hour for Howlando. All right, so S1 position. What do you want to call that? This is your max position. So this is, I mean, I think everybody agrees it believes God
exists.
Right. So if this believes God exists, and this is walk it through logically. Again, this is a logical argument, Howlando. It's not dealing with definitions. If this is theism, and we don't have to use the term theism. We're gonna say believes there's a God. Max.
Believes that God exists.
Believes that God exists. Works for me. This contradictory position, which is the diagonal, would be does not believe that God exists. Correct? Not as one.
Would it not be that? Oh no. Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
yeah. You can say theist or not theist, but I mean, it really is believes God exists, does not believe God exists, or you can just say it is not the case that God exists. This is where Arn got so confused, because the double negation doesn't exist if I say it is not the case that P is false.
Yeah, Arn doesn't understand units.
No, he is so confused on it. Because if I said believes P, it means I believe P is. If I say I believe not P is true, that means I am holding to the negation. But if I say I do not believe not P is true, I'm not doing a double negation. I'm not saying that it is true. I'm just saying I don't have the belief that's not true, because I could be agnostic on it. He doesn't get that. All right, so this is does not believe God exists. So we have two positions already logically entailed. You can't get out of that. Now, they want to call this atheist. Okay, we've already established how it would normally be in philosophy. So, okay, let's call this atheist. So you have theist and atheist, somebody who doesn't believe there's a God. Okay, what do you want to call this position, guys? You have to call this, you have something, this is the minimum, right? Maximum would be somebody who believes this proposition is true. So the minimum would clearly be somebody who believes the proposition is false. Correct? This is epistemics.
Let me play ACA. If I was an ACA cult leader, I would say anti-theist.
Well, okay,
Hank,
what's the problem with that?
Pick up a rock, smack yourself in the head with it a couple of times, and then pretend that you're ACA.
Even if you wanted to call it anti-theist, what does that mean, though? What is this position? Like, this is believes God exists. What is this? Don't worry about the name. What is this? It is believes God does not exist. It is a contrary.
Yeah, it has to be. It can't be anything else.
Right. It's a contrary. It's a logical relationship between the S1 and S2. So
but yeah, of course. Like S1 is, they have to be the antithesis of one another. They cannot be anything else.
Correct. That's why the square of opposition works this way. So this has to be the belief there is no God. Believe not P. Believe P. Believe not P. Maximum, minimum. Negative distix, positive distix. Positive is the proposition that's positive. Negative is negative proposition or not. So this has to be theism. This is not theism. And they're going to call this whatever the hell they want, anti-theism, atheism, whatever. But this still has to be the position believes there's a God. If this is a position that believes there's a God, then what's this position down here? Oh, does not believe there's a God. Right? Because these are contradictories. So if I have this is does not believe there's a God, excuse me, does not believe there isn't a God, and this is does not believe there is a God, and I have the conjunction of those as a subcontrary, which is the logical operator of or, what is the position of somebody who neither believes God exists nor believes God does not exist? Well, that's agnostic in philosophy.
Well, you either believe both or you believe neither. And if you believe both, that's a contradiction. You can't believe both. Therefore, you believe neither, which means you're agnostic.
Right. Well, I would enumerate it like this. You can't believe both. You can believe one, you can believe the other, or neither.
Yes, but you can't believe both at the same time because they're mutually exclusive. You cannot believe both at the same time. It's mad.
Yes. Kawhi says, I really should have memorized how the square of opposition works. Well, here's the thing. It wouldn't have helped you. The reason being is the actual square of opposition deals with categories, like all SRPs, some SRPs. The logical relationships for the Aristotelian square of opposition is not quite the same as a semiotic. It's hard to explain. There's a little bit of difference, but the way that the subalternations work is a little bit different. And I found that out the hard way through trial and error. And honestly, I did have used artificial intelligence to help me process this, but I really did a deeper dive on that. The problem with the using the square of opposition for categories, which with the Aristotelian, is that one, there's a problem with the Aristotelian square originally because of what's called an empty set. But here, if you notice, this is a subset of this. Theism is a subset of not atheist. Atheism is a subset of not theist. And I keep explaining to people all the time, atheism and agnosticism are subsets of this. But this visually proves this. It has to be a subset of this. This has to be a logical subset of this.
So this is why the
ACA doesn't work.
This is obviously where the set theory comes to play, and this is a big part of where the ACA comes unstuck. So your foundational set is all things that exist.
Yes, universe.
Yeah, the universe, things that exist, and then you have your next set is things that believe God exists, and your next set does not believe God exists.
Right. That's called a complementary
sets. And in the set of does not believe God exists, you have a further complementary, a further subset, which is doesn't believe God exists and believes that God does not exist.
Correct. And real quick, let me just for Kawasa, the reason on the square of opposition is this right here is sum, this is all, and sum is a subset of all. So the subalternation is reversed on the square of opposition, which I've noticed, which is not a big deal because we're dealing with beliefs, and you can have the subalternations any way you want. The main relationships you're looking at here are the contradictories, the contrary, and the subcontrary. The subalternations are merely what implies what. In this case, somebody who believes a God implies they don't believe there isn't a God. But in the case of a categorical thing, real quick, with the square of opposition, all SRP implies some SRP, but some SRP is a subset of all SRP.
So I have a related question.
Yeah. So the problem with the
I have a related question: is natural a subset of supernatural?
No, I'm not going to get into that. No, I'm trying to think though on the square of opposition of if all SRP, because remember the A, I, O, E modes, right? So if all SRP, and that implies some SRP, which means that all or maybe it might work out that way. But I still think you have to have the subalternation arrow going the other way, because I remember looking into that. And I think you had to reverse it. But anyways, you can get the gist of it. But you should definitely look into the semiotic square of opposition to see the relationships that are set forth in it, because they're standard. I mean, I didn't make up this logic. Okay.
No, this is a tried and tested methodology.
Yes, I mean, other people have used the square of opposition for the same thing, only they had never applied it the way I did. I am the first person that I've seen ever to apply. Well, no, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that. Burgess Jackson was the first person to apply it this way. I was the first person to apply it to show that it subsumes agnosticism visually.
The way you've used it is novel. The subject on which you've used it is novel. Is how I describe it. But the issue.
Well, Burgess Jackson is the one that started it, but I literally proved the semantic collapse using he used the square of opposition, semiotic square of opposition, and I got that from him, but then I took it one step further. So what Hank says for $2 is natural a subset of supernatural? No. Supernatural is a set of look, you have a natural set, then you have the complementary set. Anything that's not in the natural set is in the non-natural set. If you want to call the non-natural set supernatural, which I do, then if you're in the supernatural set, you can't be in the natural set. If you're in the natural set, you cannot be in the supernatural set. One is not a subset of the other. They're contradictories.
I guess it depends. Like, I know this is a rabbit hole that we could potentially go down, but it depends what your definition of natural.
Oh, sure. Look, I could start off saying all things are supernatural, and then everything, the natural world came from supernatural. So an idealist, right? Somebody who has a source idealism, who thinks that a mind is created first, then physicality comes from it, they might posit supernaturalism as first, God, and then the natural came from that. So a theist could argue that the natural came from supernatural. I don't do it that way. To me, the supernatural is the complementary set of the natural.
Yeah, so that's like a really hardcore solipsistic argument, which I don't think any reasonable person would make.
Right.
But
I don't say what either.
It's also the case that, like, how do you define what is natural and what is supernatural? Because the known and the unknown, like something that is so like we have our realm of knowledge. It's what we have the capacity to know right now.
I use it that way too. Yeah, I think that anything that's so far out of our epistemic limitation, we want to call that supernatural.
Of knowledge that they seem supernatural, and given time and experimentation, may fall within the natural. So, given that, what defines our natural and supernatural is based on our sphere of knowledge, and our sphere of knowledge is ever moving. It's so, like, I don't even know what these terms mean.
Yeah, no, I still think supernatural is going to be a specific thing that anything that can like change the laws of the universe, I'm going to call that supernatural, suspend natural law. There's because that's what we really mean by it. We're meaning, is there something that can suspend natural law? I'm going to call that supernatural.
It's synonymous with magic.
Yeah, but if it suspends natural law, we could just amend natural law afterwards. So
no, but that's not the. But again, why do that? The words we use convey something. They convey a meaning to something. They convey usages of, oh, this is so far out of our own understanding. If God exists and you want to call that natural, then what the hell would be supernatural? To me, that's supernatural. It's beyond the natural. That's what we mean by words like supernatural. God is beyond the natural.
Basically, the acceleration in Earth's atmosphere is 32 feet per second, right? So if something,
well, you're dude, come on, that's imperial.
Yeah, I know, but I'm doing it for the
9.8 meters per second squared. Come on.
But my point is, if all of a sudden, for no reason that we can ascertain, the acceleration of an object fucking changed for some random reason, then will we say that's supernatural, or will we just say that there's something that we can't see? That
if I have a being that appeared to me and started like, changing the laws of physics, I'm going to say that's supernatural. Yeah, I don't care.
Yes, but if we figure out how to do it ourselves, then it'll be natural again.
Sure, but I don't think humans can change natural law.
And Terrence Howard thinks 1 times 1 equals 2.
That's stupid though. That's just stupid math. But I mean, we could bend the rules of science a little bit, but we can't redefine natural units. We can't make Planck's constant something completely different. We can't make the speed of light something completely different. These are fixed fundamental things in the universe. We cannot change constants. If we could change constants, we would have power over the universe.
Yeah, but and I have to, like, I completely get where you're coming from. I don't think we will ever be able to do those things.
I don't either.
I think if we did do those things, I think it would break the universe and we would cease to exist.
Of course. If we change the speed of light to something other than what it is now,
yeah.
I mean, everything else changes. Permittivity changes. Everything changes. Coulomb barrier changes. Everything changes. And it just, life could not exist.
If we made a discovery tomorrow that allowed us to change one of those things that we thought were unchangeable, would we say that was supernatural, or would we say it was natural?
If we did it, I would probably have to say it's natural. But again, It's such a silly argument. It's like, whatever, call it whatever the hell you want at that point. If I'm able to change the speed of light, you can call it natural, you can call it supernatural, and I'm destroying the universe. So whatever, call at that point, there's no universe to even call anything in at that point.
What I mean is, if we export that ability onto a third party, then all of a sudden we call it supernatural.
Yeah, well, like I said, I don't think man has the ability to do that.
No, but I don't think
we can reevaluate it once man has the ability to do that. Bill Hurt says, I appreciate your logic, but it seems to be dependent upon a narrow definition. Well, it's dependent upon the definition Google has, the ACA's definition. My whole argument here is literally showing that if you use ACA's definition, this is what happens. Well, actually, I'm sorry, this is what happens. And then a theist could come along and say, oh, well, I'm going to do the same thing the atheist is doing. I'm going to subsume this neuter term, and I'm going to say that agnostics are theists. Well, why not? What right does an atheist have to that position?
Yeah, that's presuppositional apologetics. That is literally what they're doing.
It is atheism presuppositional apologetics. It is absolutely atheism presuppositional apologetics. They're taking this term. They're saying, oh, I'm not going to just take this as atheist, which is the philosophy. They're going to say, oh, no, we're going to include this. And if you're not this, then you have to be this. So we're going to include all of this into atheism. That's dishonest, guys. Atheist Community of Austin, Arn Ra, Matt Dillahunty, you guys are intellectually dishonest in philosophy by saying that atheism and theism are just straight dichotomy, that if you're not one, you're the other, and that atheism is merely a lack of belief. You guys are intellectually dishonest. Straight up, there is no question about it. Every philosopher you guys know has told you guys this. They're not going to watch this, but every philosopher I know agrees with this. Every single solitary one of them, PhD, master's degree, bachelor's degree, armchair. There is not a single solitary person that knows philosophy that has shown this to be wrong. Not one.
So
not one.
Whoever just said that it's based on a very fine, narrow definition, as Steve has just pointed out, he's using the ACA definition.
Right.
I
try to explain that for how long, John, that I'm using the ACA's definition, and they're like, well, that's not what it says in your paper. Then you're not understanding my paper. My paper has to define this position up here, and I just label it as atheist, but it doesn't matter what you want to call it. You're still having a position where somebody who does not have a position either way is literally still this and that, hot, cold, warm. Oh, okay, I'm the warm position. Well, I'm going to call warm cold. Why? Because you just lack a belief in warm, or you're not warm.
If you need something like a joint or something, Jesus.
So Mike sucks, by the way. Are you on a phone?
Yes, I am.
Why is it on your computer? It's so bad, your phone, man.
Yeah, 1 second.
It's not. It sounds like a tin can.
Ricky Bobby logic. If you're not fast, you're slow.
Bill Hurt says,
"Is that better?"
Semantic Collapse. Oh my God, yes. You sound like a tin can. I had half the time I wasn't understanding what the hell you were saying. So much better.
Sorry.
God, my ears are bleeding.
Right. So as Steve has just been pointing out, like if you use the ACA definitions, then based on the semiotic square that we were just looking at, then they have one word that can both mean hot and cold at the same time.
Yes,
and
well,
that's
hot and warm according to the ACA.
Sorry, hot and warm at the same time,
right?
Or cold and warm at the same time.
Correct.
There is a significant overlap in terms of what the word means, and if the word can occupy, or if the word can mean two things that are either synonymous or exclusive at the same time, then what utility does it have? What use does it have?
Exactly. You've eliminated it. You've eliminated a position that has utility.
We're talking about.
Correct. And another thing is,
let's assume add a caveat.
Let's assume this is hot and cold. Okay, hot, cold, warm. Okay, let's assume that for a second. What right does cold have to assume warm? What right does hot have to assume warm? If you can't answer that question, then you should ask yourself, why the hell are atheists trying to assume this position? It's the same thing. It is literally a physicist saying the same thing as saying, oh, well, yeah, this is all called cold. We're going to call all this cold. Oh, but you're not this. We're going to call this cold as well. Well, no, warm is not the same as cold. That's semantic collapse because you're using now warm and cold to mean the same exact position. You've lost utility, as John pointed out. Semantic collapse is not a term I came up with, but I came up with the usage of this particular semantic collapse. Semantic collapse is a term I've read before, but they did not use it the way I'm using it. which was interesting. They did not use it at all the way I'm using it. So I didn't come up with the term semantic collapse on my own, but I saw it somewhere. Repurposed it for my own usages. Okay. And then he says, supernatural is a great term. Thank you. I've learned something new tonight about linguistics. That's why I checked in your presentation. Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to end this in a few minutes. Supernatural, I think, is quantum physics going very deeply. Particles can communicate faster than the speed of light. Yes, I just got in that discussion on Twitter, DM, a while back, and I tried to explain to somebody that local realism is dead. Particles can theoretically communicate faster than the speed of light as long as it's an internalized communication, and that communication cannot be used externally. We cannot use it for anything of use, but there could be a direct connection between two entangled particles that is instantaneous, which means that they communicate instantaneously, which they do. We know this for a fact. Spooky at a distance. Why they communicate faster than the speed of light, we have no idea. How they do, we have no idea. And we don't know if it's real or something else.
There is a legitimate scientific hypothesis that there is only one electron.
Yeah, one world electron theory.
One electron. And because they're all identical and we can't tell them apart, this one electron is just hopping around the universe like instantaneously from position to position to position.
Correct. It's called the one. The reason that's hypothesized, and why it's not, I don't believe in it, but it's the reason it's not far fetched is because
we can neither prove it nor disprove it. But
it's philosophy. Every single electron is identical.
Yeah,
except for the spin or whatever. But if you have two electrons that are same spin, they're the exact same charge, exact same energy, exact same everything. They're literally the same thing. They're indistinguishable. And there's something called the indiscernibilities of identicals, which means if two things have the same properties of the same thing. So if two electrons have the exact same properties, then by the property of the indiscernibilities of identicals, two electrons are the same electron. So there is a reasoning behind that one world electron theory. Right?
Yeah.
And that's based on Leibniz's math.
Yeah, Leibniz.
Leibniz.
Yeah, whatever.
Leibniz. All right. So anyways, John, I do got to wrap this up because I did want to keep this under an hour so he can digest it easily. I think that we made our case. If anybody doesn't understand at this point, I don't know what else to do. But again, if you don't understand what I said, then don't say that my paper's assailed and that my paper's wrong, because it's just annoying. And
yeah, I mean, cold isn't warm.
Right. Warm is warm is not cold. Yeah. And I've linked, I'll link my Twitter thing here because I explain it here. I did have a little correction because it should say that this assumes the entire neuter term does not believe God exists and does not believe God does not exist. I forgot this not in the original. So I will link this in the video description after I'm done. But thanks you, John, for joining me. I got to turn the AC back on because it's starting to get hot again.
Thank you for having me
all night.
As always.
Thank you, buddy. All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you later. Leave me comments if you got any questions. But like I said, don't leave me comments that it's wrong. I'm not going to bother with it. I'm probably either going to delete them or just tell you to get educated. I'm just past that point. Yeah, I'm not going to have the base level conversations with people that are so damn. And I'm not talking about Howlando. Howlando's a really cool guy, but I'm talking about the atheist community of Austin people. You guys are idiots, just absolute freaking morons.
Yeah, please, for the love of Christ, if it's an actual question, ask a question. You will, and if it's an honest question, you will get an honest answer. It will be explained.
That's my motto.
Go,
honest and lockers get honest answers. That's the thing I've said for years. But how many? Before I go, John, let me ask you this: how many people that have said my paper's wrong understood any of this before I just explained it? I mean, I've explained it once or twice before, but they've never watched my videos.
Honestly, I've the number of times I've tried to explain this to people and they've gone, it's wrong because they're just running on intuition.
Yes,
and it's not. The philosophy behind this has been tried and tested for literally hundreds of years. This is the culmination of hundreds of years of work. And if you think that you have just popped your head off the pillow in the morning with your intuitions and gone, this is wrong, then you're a fucking moron.
Correct.
I'm sorry, but the horsepower, the calories that have been put into this before you were even born and you think that you're just gonna wake up in the morning and because of your intuitions go, this is wrong, have some fucking humility.
They won't. And Top G pointed out
Actually
correct.
try and understand the argument rather than just run on intuition. Make the
Eh,
assumption that you might have missed something and
Yeah.
look into it.
And
Because I
why is it all,
guarantee you have.
why is it that every philosopher agrees with me? I mean, every single one of them. I don't know any that doesn't. I don't know any that doesn't. Something
reason I
something
say
just
this, Steve,
clicking to them, and they go, "Oh, maybe Steve's right." And again, if your only argument is that I didn't use the correct definition, you automatically don't understand my paper because there is no such thing as a correct definition. I use the definition
one of these
that
people.
use.
Many years ago, I was one of these people. I was one of these sort of started watching Hitchens on YouTube, like went down this rabbit hole. And the second that I picked up a book on philosophy and actually strapped my ass down in the seat and did the reading, I went, oh fuck.
Was this after you read something from me or just in general?
Sorry?
Was this after you saw something from me or read something from me or just in general?
It was at the same time. I started looking for sources on, like, I was interested in YouTube, and like Hitchens, like Christopher Hitchens was the first sort of atheist. My position as a like 20-something kid was religion is all that's wrong with the world, and I was looking for reasons to fucking hate it.
Yeah, that's not a well thought out position though, and you
No,
realize that, and you started educating yourself. That's great.
It was an emotional reaction rather than
exactly.
a rational or logical reaction.
And I see a lot of atheist community of Austin people doing that. They're just bitter. That's where they get the anger of the atheist from.
There's nothing in my history that makes me hate religion, but I thought I was by opposing myself to what I thought was irrational, I assumed that I was being rational, when I was actually just being the corollary of them. I was irrational in the other direction. And I've actually ended up working my way to the middle ground and going, actually, I can look at the irrational on this side of me and that side of me. And
you gained epistemic humility is what you did.
Yeah.
Let me get through this real quick.
I actually did the work. I did some reading. I actually looked into it.
I hate to cut it short. I got to get through this. I got my roommate coming home soon. I got to get the AC on, or it's going to be hot in here, and I'm going to get yelled at. So I got to wrap this up, John. I'm going to take you out because if not, we're going to be talking forever. And I got to wrap this up. Okay.
No, you're good, Steve. I'm done. Honestly.
All right, thank you, buddy. I'm not. Yeah, I have to, because if not, I could talk for hours. You know that. Okay.
Well, we can.
All right. Yeah. All right. Thanks, John. All right. So let me wrap this up, guys. 2 minutes, and then I got to go. So Top G, you're absolutely right. The ACA and the line, folks, which by the way is from Jimmy Snow, who helped my business partner steal $60,000 from my channel. In my opinion, that's my opinion, that he helped Kyle do that because he was streaming on my channel after Kyle stole it from me in order to try to steal that channel from me and 60 grand. And he would not ask Kyle where the money was. And I wrote 2 things about Jimmy Snow, showing his duplicity, showing his dishonesty, showing that he was just siding with Kyle. And people could go read that on my blog. Go look at www.greatdebatecommunity.com and then look at Jimmy, just search Jimmy Snow, but I have 2 articles on him. So you might want to be aware of that. Jimmy Snow is not an honest person. I will stand by that till the day I die. That he absolutely helped my business partner steal that money because he streamed my channel after Kyle illegally took the channel, and I had to sue to get that channel back, which I did. He still owes me $130,000, by the way. So I was proven right. But yes, they are cultish, and they never like this pointed out. They get offended by it because they don't understand it. Top G, they're idiots. The ACA and the line, everybody on there, when it comes to philosophy like this, they're morons. They have a few good people. Paulo G is smart. Like Paulo G is like the smartest person they've got over there. But his area is biblical stuff, right? I wouldn't say he's exceptionally great on some of the philosophy, but he's decent. He makes some faux pas, and some other philosophers pointed out, but he's definitely a smart freaking dude. But other than that, I don't know who else they have over there. But I haven't listened to them in ages. But the original ACA lineup is the only thing that I could stomach, and that was because I like Tracy Harris. But after she left, it was all downhill after that. And they're just very cultish. Our atheism is known as one of the biggest cults on Reddit. They are absolutely a cult, in my opinion. So yes, I'm glad you noted that. And for those who watch this later on, no, I'm not an atheist. No, I'm not a theist. I do not believe in God. I actually would tend to Satanism as over Christianity any day of the week. So don't sit there and try to say, oh, Steve's just a theist. Steve's just condemning ACA. No, I'm not. Okay. So that needs to be, be nipped in the bud before anybody even says that, because I'm sick of people saying, oh, Steve's just a closet theist. I do not believe in God. I have no God belief. So I'm definitely not a theist. Although according to Semantic Collapse, I can be. If I don't take a position either way, I'm both an atheist and a theist, because why not? Because terms mean nothing to these people. But anyways, I do got to go. Bill says, would you like to have a chat about other possibilities? Sure, but I don't know what other. Logically, there are no other possibilities, direct relationships on the proposition. There's indirect. There's an infinite amount of positions indirect. Like, I don't care about P. I hate P. That sounds weird. Those are all indirect positions. But there's only 2 direct positions on P, which is believes P and believes not P, and then a third indirect, which is a psychological state of not believing neither. But that's still a type of position, because I can show it here, right? So it is a position. So there's 3 positions according to the semiotic square, right? There's atheism, there's believes this position up here, believes this position up here, believes neither of the positions, right? 3 doxastic attitudes, correct, Kawasa. 3 doxastic attitudes, believes P, believes not P. And this could be for any proposition. This is why it doesn't have to be atheism. Just before I go, I'll leave you some other things, like another example. Let's say, anti-theism. Anti-theism has actually the position that the belief in God is dangerous to society or harmful to society. It lowers the axiological value. So this is going to be the position that believes religion is beneficial. We're going to call that protheism, because that's what it's called. We're going to say this position believes religion and belief in God is harmful, net axiological value negative. We're going to call that anti-theism, if you want. Okay. And then you have a position here, which is neither. Somebody who's neither a protheist or an anti-theist. Somebody who thinks that there really isn't a significant amount of leeway either way. It's like, okay, well, yeah, there's religion, there's God, there's pluses, minuses, there's pros and cons. I'm not an anti-theist, and I'm not a protheist. I guess this would be protheist and this would be anti-theist. I'm neutral. And then the atheist community of Austin comes around and says, oh, you're neutral in the proposition. Well, we're going to call that anti-theist. Well, no, if I was an anti-theist, I would say I'm an anti-theist and hold the position that the axiological value of society is lessened by the belief in God or religion. But that's not my position. I take a neuter position. I take the position that I'm not a protheist, I'm not an anti-theist. But the ACA doesn't allow those neuter positions, because they just subsume it. So any 2 positions that are contrary, such as protheism and anti-theism, you can have this neuter position. Now, somebody had put something about Pepsi and Coke. Those are not contrary positions, right? You have to have contrary positions, which are defined as, again, S1 and S2, which is you can be one, you can be the other, you can be neither, but you can't be both. That's a contrary, right? You can be a theist, you can be an atheist, but you can't be both in philosophy. But in the ACA, well, then things get a little bit confusing, because they want this position to be called atheist. It's stupid. It's anti-philosophical. Dr. Draper points it out. Dr. Oppie points it out. Dr. Burgess Jackson points it out. Dr. Demi points it out. Dr. P.K. Moser points it out. Dr. Schellenberg points it out. Dr. Rowe points it out. I mean, I can go on and on and on about how many experts have pointed this out, but what do they know compared to Matt Dillahunty, right? Yeah. So Matt, you're screwed. Logic shows you're wrong. Put on your big point pants. Defend. Write a refutation of my paper, and I'll defend it. But he won't ever do it. He'll never read it. He's never seen it, as far as my knowledge. But there's no way that Matt Dillahunty or Aaron Raw would even understand what the hell I'm talking about on this. They're wrong. Suck it up, guys. Suck it up. I've proven it. I've proven it. And I've proven it. I proved it using 3 different types of logic: meta logic, Boolean logic, propositional logic. And then Dr. William Pye proved it in Gizler logic. So 4 different types of logic this is proven. So you're going to have to up your game, ACA, if you want to say that my paper is wrong or that atheism is merely a lack of belief and that all of philosophy is wrong, because you guys are idiots. I don't even know what else to say. So I feel better. I hope Howlando gets something out of this. This was for him. And if he has any questions, by all means, ask me. But I really do think that visually, I think you can really see better now my argument of the semantic collapse. And then we'll leave it here. Bill says, well, that's a lot of internet stuff. I've been away a long time. I don't understand any of it, but I thank you for the EXO program. Thank you. Anonymously glad. Thank you for pointing out my specs. You're welcome. Feel free to become a member of the channel. Oh, there's Howlando. He says, my contention is that ACA simply uses dichotomy theist, not theist. Right. But that leads to semantic collapse. Right? Because I've proven it. Because if you have theist up here, you have to have not theist down here. Well, if you have not theist down here, what do you want to call this position? It's still the belief there's no God. I mean, it has to be, right? Because they're contraries. If this is the belief there's a God, what's the contrary? The belief there isn't a God. That's just basic logic, right? Contrary. It's a contrary position. So yeah, I'm sorry, Helen. I do got to go. I really, really do. But I wanted to keep this digestible for you, so I'm keeping it under 90 minutes. I wanted to go an hour, so go ahead and watch it on your own convenience and then message me. But hopefully this should really help you visually see that it does lead to semantic collapse, and that my paper does not use the definition I use for atheism. It uses the ACA's definition for atheism and explains, if you use the ACA's definition, which is the Google definition, that this is what happens. This is what happens. It leads to semantic collapse. So yeah, I'm sorry too. I know that you said you may or may not be able to be around, but this is the only time I had, and my roommate's supposed to be home like before 9. So I want to get the AC back on before she does, because it's hot. All right. But thank you, Howlando, for your comments. They do mean a lot. I do appreciate it. But I do got to go. So good night, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.